All right, well, welcome to this live edition of the Mile High Endurance and 303 Radio podcast. Bill Plock and myself are really honored to have four-time English Channel crosser, all at one time, nonstop, Sarah Thomas with us. Sarah, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We have been so excited about this interview. We want to get to know you. We want our audience here to get to know you a little bit. Before we get into this amazing thing that you've done, we want to get to know you a little better.
Okay.
And so we have this little game we like to play called Two Truths and a Lie, where we ask our guests for three statements about themselves, two of which are truths, one of which is a lie, and Bill and I are going to try to guess which is which.
And now we have body
Nice.
language. Now we
Yeah.
have body language.
language.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So,
You know, we play this game on
so
my
I'm
swim
going to take
sometimes.
your pulse while you're doing
Yeah,
this.
you
and
can
see if you
tell.
get sweaty.
Yeah. My team does this with me sometimes on my long swims to keep me like occupied. So
Okay,
people on
sure.
the crew will, so I am usually the guesser.
Oh,
I'm not
I
usually
see.
the teller.
So you play a little Trivial Pursuit while you're swimming.
Yeah.
We're flipping
Okay.
the tables on you here.
Yeah.
So whenever you're ready, give us your three statements, two of which are truths, one of which is a lie.
I can't think of my lie.
Oh, well, all right. Well,
Hang on, I'm going to come up with something.
okay. Well, that's good.
Okay. Let's see here. I have 3 dogs. The farthest I've ever swum is 104 miles, and I really hate cats.
Okay.
I'd say your lie is you hate cats.
Yes. Our cat died this summer.
Oh.
We miss him.
Right. I can tell. Right.
So you have 3 dogs.
We do have 3 dogs.
What are the dogs' names?
Lucy and Zoe are beagles,
Okay.
and Kelsey Joe is this like weird border collie corgi mix.
Okay.
She's very goofy looking.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite?
No.
Just out, I don't know.
My husband would tell you that I love Lucy the most.
Okay. All right.
It's just my girl. She's dumb. She's the dumbest dog you'll ever meet.
So when you talk about the distance that you've swam, the longest
Mm-hmm.
distance that you've swam, 108 miles, you said?
104.
104 miles?
Mm-hmm.
Is that like as the crow flies, or does that take into account currents and all that sort of thing?
Yeah, that distance is what I did in Lake Champlain. So
Yeah.
that was a nonstop swim in a lake, basically point to point. So
Point to
no
point.
currents,
Yeah.
nothing, just straight 104 miles.
How long did that take you?
67 hours.
And there's no sharks in there, so it's like mind's free, right?
There's lampreys in there.
Oh, really?
Yeah, don't Google them. They're scary.
Wow.
They're eels, and they have like weird mouths.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and they like attach to you.
Have you ever had one?
No, but we saw them, and I thought they were going
Oh.
to be like, like normal size, like
Yeah.
you could like grab them. But we
Would you
swam.
grab one?
I didn't, but we swam through a bunch of them. And I didn't see them, thank goodness, but my crew did, and they're all like laughing, like covering their mouths and like trying not to look at me. And later I asked, I'm like, how big were they? And my husband was like, big, like as big as his forearm. And I was like, I'm glad I didn't have to run into one of those.
Wow, no
Because
kidding.
that would have scared me. They
Well,
were there.
We've got a lot to cover before we
Yes.
get to that. Let's start back with. Tell us about where you grew up and kind of like what was your introduction to sport? Like, what was your first sport?
Swimming,
Swimming.
really. I mean,
Straight to it.
yeah, we tried other sports. Like, I'm a really bad basketball player.
Okay.
I played like volleyball in middle school. I'm terrible with things that involve balls. I'm a terrible runner. They tried to get me to run track one season, and I'm like, no, I'm not going to do it. So I've tried other sports, but yeah, I've been on a swim team basically since I was 10.
Since you were 10, you said we. So there's some siblings in there.
Oh, I have a lot of siblings.
Yeah. Tell us about your siblings.
I'm a blended family, so I've got 4 sisters and a brother. Of one full sister, and the rest are half.
Okay. All right.
So, big family.
So you start swimming at the age of 10. What was your distance? In high school.
I started off, I was a breaststroker beginning, and then I quit getting better. And my coach said, well, why don't we try you in the mile? So they threw me into the distance events, and that is what stuck.
Oh, okay. So that was your you wanted to do longer stuff.
Yeah, it was definitely a much better fit just from like a mental standpoint once I gave up on the breaststroke thing. It was probably my sophomore or junior year of high school that we started in with like the 500, the 800, the mile.
What did you like the most about it? Like what was what was the attraction to swimming longer distance?
Yeah, well, it takes me forever to get warmed up.
Oh,
So,
okay.
I'm trying to sprint at 200, and I'm not going until the end of it. So, in a mile, you get a little bit more time to warm up into it. And I always joke because turns out I needed more than a mile. Like my first 10K swim, I was like, oh, this is better.
We're going to warm up for the first 5K,
Yeah, exactly.
right?
Yeah.
Then pour it on.
Yeah, I can sprint a 10K.
What was your first sort of open water endurance swim that was of a substantial length?
Yeah, I started with the Horsetooth 10K.
Oh yeah.
That's local here in Fort Collins, so that was my first one
And when was that?
in 2007.
2007. Okay.
Yeah, I was 25.
Wow.
So
Okay.
yeah,
So were you like one of the youngest swimmers there?
on the younger end
Yeah,
for
yeah.
sure. I felt old, like you're out of college, your like swimming career is over, and then all of a sudden I'm doing this like weird 10K thing. My college, like 2 of my college friends kayaked for me, and I'm like, this is weird. And then it was awesome.
So you weren't swimming professionally.
No.
You've got a full-time job. Like, what's your
Yeah.
career outside of swimming?
Yeah, I am a healthcare recruiter,
Okay.
so lucky I get to work from home, but it's a 40+ hour a week job, so I do all my swimming around working.
Yeah. Well, so all right. So talk about the training for an ultra swim or even a 10K.
Let
swim.
me ask
Yeah,
more.
yeah.
So talk about the progression from a Horsetooth, which a lot of people have done,
Right.
to maybe that first kind of scary channel crossing or
Right.
that open, the swim in the ocean.
Right.
How did that progress?
Yeah, so I did that Horsetooth 10K maybe 3 years in a row, and somewhere in like year 2 or 3, I was like, I think I could do more. And because of Horsetooth, I was meeting people that had done channel swims, and they're just regular people. I'm like, they're regular like me. If they can do it, maybe I can do it too. So I guess it was in 2010. So that was when I did my very first long swim, 21 miles in the Catalina Channel.
Okay.
So-
So that's kind of where I jumped from 10K to 20
It's the
miles.
Catalina Channel. That's scary.
It was, and you start at night in the middle for that one. You start at like midnight.
There's sharks in that one.
There are sharks in that one.
Yeah.
For sure.
Wow.
I was too dumb. I don't think I knew what I was getting myself into.
That's crazy.
Ignorance is bliss.
What other channels have you swam around the world?
Let's see here. I have swum the English Channel, obviously.
Yeah, 4 times.
Yeah,
Four
4
times.
times. I started with it once. I've swum around the island of Manhattan.
Oh,
Interesting.
that's the marathon.
Yeah, the
Marathon.
Manhattan Island Marathon
Yeah, yeah.
swim. Yeah, it's like 28.5 miles, but that one has a good current assist because it's in the rivers.
Ah,
Let's see here. I have swum down and back across Lake Tahoe.
okay. Yep.
So that's like
Read that.
42 miles in that vicinity. I have swum the length of Loch Ness. Like 15 people in the world have done that because it's really cold. It's like 52-degree water.
Wow.
And if the weather's not nice, then it can be kind of brutal. So that's a big one. trying to think of it.
Have you done the New Zealand?
Oh yeah, I have.
You did that.
I have swum between the 2 islands of New Zealand. I did that in March.
So I knew a guy that was doing that. I swam at the DAC, and he was training there.
Okay.
And he'd swam for the Israeli Olympic team.
Oh, cool.
I forget his name off the top of my head now. But we talked about that swim, and the currents on that one are really crazy, right? How was that swim?
That swim, I was about 6 months. I know we're going to talk about this later, but I was about 6 months out of radiation treatment. So it was like really my first big swim back. And that swim is relatively short. So I wasn't like mentally prepared for it to be super brutal. I was thinking it would take me like maybe 9 or 10 hours. And we had a really rough day. The weather was just like rotten. It was really windy, and the currents were just crazy. And that swim took me 14 hours. And I thought it was going to take 9. So it was definitely a battle of wills. There was another girl who had started the swim basically at the same time that I did. And she swam for about 12 hours and decided she'd had enough. It was brutal. I was swallowing water. I was sick. It was crazy.
Is there one that stands out as the hardest of all the different things you've done?
Usually what jumps out to me is Catalina, that very first one I did. I didn't have my nutrition dialed in yet. I was definitely well trained. It wasn't that, but I bonked really hard. So like the last 4 hours of that swim are probably the most pain I've ever been in.
Wow. And so the English Channel, probably since its notoriety is unparalleled, no doubt, and 4 times. How many miles total was that then?
As the crow flies, it's 84 miles.
Okay. How many miles did you swim?
You know, I don't even really know.
You don't know?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
You weren't checking your Garmin
No,
every hour?
I wasn't checking it. The currents just push and pull you so much, it's almost irrelevant to me. So
Wow.
it took about as long as I thought it was going to take. So
And you pilot boat and help you navigate the currents,
Right.
because I was looking at the map and you had all kinds of
Yes,
interesting
yeah.
tracks.
yes, we went. You can go on a neap tide or a spring tide. Spring tides move a lot more, so we went on a spring tide. So I knew going into it that we were going to get pushed and pulled a lot. And then you just have to trust your boat captain. He's probably taken at least 100 people across over the years, so he knows what he's doing. So you just trust him to know what the currents are doing. Follow the boat.
What went into that decision? Like, why did you make the decision to do the spring tide versus the other?
He booked me on both.
Okay.
So there's usually a really long wait list to swim the English Channel. And so when I reached out to him originally, I said, hey, I've got this really crazy idea. He knew that we needed a big window. So he booked me a week on a neap tide and a week on a spring tide. And the weather was not good that first week. We would have preferred to have gone on a neap tide, but the weather conditions were not ideal for that. So when the English Channel gives you 48 hours of good weather, you take it.
Can you describe the difference between those tides and kind of like why one's more preferable than the other?
Yeah, just the neap tide, the water isn't moving as much, right?
Okay.
So I would have had a much more direct path. It probably would have taken roughly the same time, just because on the spring tide, I was swimming more and moving more, but the currents were a lot stronger.
Right.
So if you compared my overall speed on the spring tide to a neap tide, I probably appeared to be swimming a lot faster on that spring tide, but that was just because the currents were pushing and pulling in weird ways.
So maybe before we get into some of the specifics of that swim and the feat in general, I Googled top human endurance feats of all time.
Okay.
And it's a little goofy, right? Because sometimes, like, this guy was the number one on the list. He did an hour and a half plank.
Oh, God.
Okay, cool.
That sounds terrible.
That's hard. Or Jack LaLanne second, towing 70 rowboats while shackled.
That sounds
Difficult, no doubt. But I sort of like to focus on maybe a skilled athletic endurance event, not just something anybody could do if they were just dumb
Right.
enough, right? So I personally think Alex Honnold's climb up El Capitan, because obviously any slip, he dies.
Right.
Heart rate goes up, he dies. There's no out.
Yeah, I was sick just watching Free Solo.
Yeah. Where's your feet in this list?
I don't know. Hopefully above the guy towing rowboats.
I would hope. But I mean, clearly it's one for the ages. Nobody's done it.
Right.
How does that feel to you?
That's a hard question. I've progressed, like I did hard swims leading up to it. So to me, it was just another swim. And I still kind of trying to grasp the idea that it meant something to other people in the way that it did. So, for me, I just did a swim. I've been dreaming about it for 3 years, planning for it, training for it, thinking about it, and I just did it. So I don't know where I would put it on the list.
Because it's going to be on there at some point. This was written before your
Okay.
accomplishment. It's got to show up at some point, right? And it was funny because we were talking before this started, and I'm just going to label you the Forrest Gump of swimmers because you told me that
Yep.
you didn't expect a camera crew to be there when you finished. You didn't even expect all of these people
No.
like us wanting to interview
Right.
you.
Not
you
a
just
clue.
went out and swam like he went out and run.
Right.
I was watching this last night, by the way,
Okay.
and the running scene's always my favorite because he starts with no beard and he has a beard,
Yep,
and then
yep.
that's how it was for you, right?
Yeah.
So you just wanted to go swim.
Yeah, it was something I thought I could do, and I thought it would be cool, and wanted to prove something to myself. I don't know. Went and did it.
Was it the specific idea of doing the 4 channel channel crossings. That
Yes.
was a specific idea.
Yes.
When did that occur to you? In the shower? In a conversation with a mentor? Like,
Yeah.
when did it occur to you?
Yeah, I was actually sitting on a boat in the English Channel watching one of my friends do it. And I was I was in the middle of training for my first 80-mile swim. And I kind of, hadn't been back to England since I had done my own swim. And I'm sitting there and watching him and thinking, man, this is just 80 miles. If I can do 80 miles in a couple of months, maybe I'd like to come back and try it. I knew that people had done it 3 times before. 4 people have swum it 3 times, but no one had ever done it 4. And so that, really, it was just watching my friends swim, thinking, this is a pretty special place. I'd like to come back here and see what maybe I could do.
Just to see what you could do.
Mm-hmm.
Did you know? Did you consciously think that will make history? I mean,
No.
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 I just want to swim.
Yeah, I just wanted
It's
to come
very
there
simple.
and swim.
We're making this awfully complicated, aren't we?
I know.
You didn't get sponsors. You didn't
No,
get.
yeah, there's very little sponsors to be had in the world of open water swimming.
I bet they wish they had sponsored you now
I know,
with all the
yeah.
coverage and the
Yeah.
whatever. That's interesting.
Yep.
So